Hello and welcome to This Week at the Movies. I'm Matt.
Dun dun dun. Oh, I'm Eric.
And if you couldn't tell by that humming, we are about to go on an impossible mission. That's because after years of delays, Mission Impossible 7 Dead Reckoning Part 1, hard to believe that a Part 1 takes 3 hours, but welcome to 2023. But that was the big movie that was released this week. And Eric, I know it left you scratching your head in a few ways. So why don't you jump on in and tell the folks what you thought?
All right, well, let's get this right off the bat. The movie is a absolute thrill ride from beginning to end. Everything that they are selling this movie on, the action with Tom Cruise, the stunt work, everything is as entertaining in funny ways as it is in action and exciting and thrilling ways. And on that statement alone, I give this movie like a solid thumbs up. But this is the seventh movie in a franchise, and it's the first one to me that feels very bizarrely like it needed to explain things it didn't need to explain, like what the IMF is, and like we were laughing in our theater, my wife and I, at a very early sequence when a board full of just government people, like you're not even 100% what their jobs are just kind of tossing back and forth, and you're recognizing faces like there's Peter from Deadpool 2, there's one of the ladies from Game of Thrones, and like all this stuff, and they're just finishing each other's sentences, showing that everyone in the room already knows what they're talking about. And if they're not finishing each other's sentences, it's Carrie Elways going, "So you're telling me," and then dumbing down what was just said for the rest of the audience. And there were multiple scenes like this in the movie. And like, so this movie is kind of, they need to dump information at you because they want you to be as invested as possible in these extended action sequences. And they are extended. It's just that they're so well done that I wouldn't cut them down. Personally, I'm fine with the movie's runtime. But you don't need 4 train cars of the same action sequence over and over again with different settings. You can do 3, and it would cut like 5 minutes of movie or whatever. So there are definitely areas where this could be trimmed, but I wouldn't trim them. There are definitely areas where this movie was spoon feeding the audience and kind of treating the audience like, you need to understand this simpler and simpler. But I probably wouldn't change anything. I had a super ton of fun watching the movie. And unfortunately, that's just all I get out of it. In a franchise that I'm a huge fan of, and sometimes I usually feel like I get a little bit more, just a little bit more passion from the director, or a little bit more investment in like the characters. I don't know. I'm going with a thumbs up. I have a little more to say on it, but I want to know your thoughts pretty bad. So,
Well, I think part of it, so it is a part 1, which means it lacks a little bit of a conclusion, even though it is almost 3 hours long.
mm,
I will say I agree with you in that I don't think they needed the people in the government to explain what the IMF was, except for Carrie Elways apparently didn't know what it was. But I will not agree that you don't learn something new about the IMF, because I would say I never watched the show, so maybe this was a foundational piece of the show. Sorry, I was born in 1981, so I wasn't alive in the 60s and 70s when it was on TV. I don't
well, I
think I
was.
Yeah, there you go. I don't think I realized that they all had been criminals of some sort that were given an opportunity to go to prison or become a ghost agent. I feel like that was a little bit of new
That's
learning.
new. Yeah.
And at the same time, if you're going to keep going back to that one flashback of the woman that Tom Cruise lost, and now I'm perfectly satisfied they didn't try to do de-aging technology in this, because they would have had to get a
Mm-hmm.
30 years younger Tom Cruise. And I'm not sure we needed that, but you don't get enough out of that sequence other than Isai Morales shot her, and Tom Cruise was sad about it and apparently got framed for it. To I wanted to know more, because they were trying to say this is foundational to who he is. and would relate to. I don't understand after the last two movies how there would be any choice for him between he's going to protect Ilsa or the thief that he just met. Unless
Talk
you're
about life
trying
bleed.
to, yeah, unless you're trying to say that it's just like a pattern that reminds him of this younger woman, in which case we needed to know more about their backstory and not just pick up with her bleeding out. And I thought it was interesting. She gets like her name in the opening title credits and stuff, but you don't have a lot in that flashback. I don't know if they're saving that for the next flashback. I kind of liked the cold open. Um, but a lot of people have pointed out then it then is frustrating that the audience already knows exactly what that key opens and where it is, and they're spending the whole movie trying to find that out. That didn't really bother me that much,
Me
but
either. Like to me, that's just to me in Mission Impossible, the set pieces are all structured this way.
yeah,
You are shown exactly how Langley works in the first film before they ever make an effort to go there. They've just what they've kind of done, and I know apparently the leak was it wasn't intentional. That opening was supposed to be a part of early filming for the 8th movie, and then there was like a studio note to put it in. So I do feel like they have built up this adventure to this submarine now
it's
as
a
like a
studio
thing.
note. 2.5 hours isn't enough. Make it
Yeah,
2:45. Put
yeah.
15 minutes. Was it a studio note that got us the train sequence in Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny as
Uh-huh.
well?
Yeah. Yeah. So
I did just on a entirely separate note binge watch Project Greenlight, and let me tell you, it does make you think about who is really making some of these horrendous decisions when it comes to making a movie. I will say this one definitely upped the stakes for me in terms of uh, action and adventure. I think this was some of the biggest most high concept and most ambitious action sequences. With not just in the trailer we you see him do the motorcycle jump thing, but all of the action sequences were really well done, and they were probably up the stakes. This is a franchise, you mentioned it's the 7th installment. It's been going since 1996, but I would say it was the rare franchise for me where it just kept getting better, which I'll touch when we go over our Mission Impossible series rankings later. This one is the first one in a while that didn't top previous installments for me. I'm still giving it a thumbs up. I felt some of the length there at the end. Maybe it was just because I had 40 ounces of water and was really regretting that life choice by the time we were getting to some of the climatic sequences. But also, it was in the same way I really liked Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, but it started to feel a little bit long at the end, knowing that you weren't actually going to get a resolution to anything. You were just kind of going to get left in
yeah.
the middle
They tried to
of
hide
the
that
journey.
too, but
Well, they tried to hide it a little bit in both, and it's not like you don't get something of a resolution in that
I
he
feel like
captures the
this is
key and
pretty
figures out what it
conclusive.
is.
Yeah.
It's just now that sets him on the real mission. And I did like the twist kind of at the end. You get the voiceover from Henry Tierney and his character that gives you a different framing for everything that Tom Cruise is doing, because you had their exchange in the middle of the film where you think he's just kind of gone rogue. And at the end, maybe not so much. Maybe this was the actual, mission he got sent on, which makes a little more sense. I liked some of the actors. I was really sad that that Mantis left the Guardians of the Galaxy to just become a villain. That was
I'm
no.
actually that moment really interested me because I feel like there's a twofold way of looking at that Gabriel, the character, looking at Palm Clemente and saying, "You're going to betray me and you're going to do this." On the one hand, it feels like he's saying like I know like the future because of the entity, like the algorithm, and he's turning on her. But on the flip side, he could be giving her orders because she doesn't explain to Tom Cruise why she is helping him. Like she does say like why did you save me and that kind of thing, but she doesn't. She just goes to start helping him like she's following the order. She doesn't explain well, he's predicting that I'm going to do this, so you need to be aware of da 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 da. I feel like she's not done, and I really enjoyed her glee in being a bad guy. And so this little like journey she had of just being the sort of, I think I'm liking the bad guys this year a little bit more than you, because you didn't like what's his name either, Flat Top in Dial of Destiny.
Oh, I really didn't.
Boyd
That
Holbrook?
doesn't even compare. I liked Pom Clementif in this, and it's nice
Oh,
to
okay.
see her in something else. I don't know if people. I was sort of making a joke that Mantis. I don't know if people
Oh, okay.
recognize that she's the actress that plays Mantis in
Oh yeah, I doubt it.
Guardians of the Galaxy, because that's such a kind of a different
Departure.
Facial structure and different kind of performance and everything. I thought she was really good in this. Tom Cruise is good in this role. I enjoy him. I like Ving Rhames and Simon Pegg for what they do, but I thought this was a really nice showcase of a couple of really strong female performances too. I liked Haley Atwell and what she did. I've really enjoyed Rebecca Ferguson in the 3 movies now that she's been in that role. Pom Clementif was a lot of fun. She had much more personality than Gabriel, who was kind of the more flat
Yeah.
I mean, villain, but I think they're saving him some
justified.
because
he's driven by a calculator essentially. I can understand his character. Like I feel like he does enough to make you feel like he does have sort of a lust for violence, but that he's keeping it in check for survival because he's following a calculator. Like I believed what he was doing. It is just kind of a bummer that, kind of like the villain in Ghost Protocol, they're sort of, just because they're so committed to their job, they're just boring. Like, and that's kind of the thing. So I think he does a good job with what he has, but his character on paper is someone who is hitting plot point A and B and C in order and following a plan. And it's, it'll be really interesting when people start betraying people and the human element throws things off, I think, in part 2.
Yeah, which, I thought because they've been working on it for a long time that they'd pretty much be done. But that is unfortunately one of the films that had to pause production because of the SAG-AFTRA strike. So there is really no guarantee of when we're going to see it. I think they were aiming for next year, but that seems like that's
as long as they actually pause. Yeah, as long as they actually pause these productions and don't continue them until they have their crew functioning and working again, I'm good. It's when we get these movies that are pushed through where they let Daniel Craig write some of Quantum of Solace and they kind of force, like, they start shooting Transformers 2 without a script and go for like multiple weeks before they even have something. That's the kind of stuff from the writer's strike we know from like 2008 to 07, 08 that really stung.
Well, I think though it's impossible now because outside of England, which apparently has rules, so like House of the Dragon season 2, they're obligated to keep going because England doesn't recognize the legitimacy of union strikes. So they're but I think what makes it different, writer strikes happen. That's actually ironically how we got some of the masterful pieces of Jaws. They were coming up against a writer's strike, and that's why Carl Gottlieb, who's a screenwriter, is actually in the movie, because they didn't really have a script when they started, and a lot of it got improvised, like Quint's speech about being on the Indianapolis. That was just Robert Shaw, because they needed to shoot something. If you watch the documentary about Jaws, it's Steven Spielberg telling you what a fraught production it was.
Oh yeah,
and how much trouble they had with everything that's now iconic, from lines and line readings to the fact you don't see the shark. All because nothing went right. They were like, this is going to be the biggest hot mess, and it works out great. But they've done things without with the writers on strike, but with SAG-AFTRA on strike, you don't have on-screen performers either.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned like this is also a kind of a theme of these stories, these Mission Impossible stories. Things go wrong, and human nature and luck, is pulls people through, and like willpower and whatnot. I wanted to say one thing about so like you mentioned, we learn about the IMF. On the one hand, that element that you talked about of learning the way that it functions and that sort of rule that you accept a choice, I love all that. That is excellent world building for things. The kind of thing that I'm picking at is, yeah, when they're in the room with Carrie Elways and they go like, "What does IMF stand for?" Which we've known since the third movie
I
is
don't think they
Impossible
actually
Mission
said it
Force. They
in this
did
one either.
Impossible Mission Force, and then and they go on to explain what it is, and he's like, "So you're telling me that when no one can get the job done, you just hope someone out in the wind you don't know gets it done?" And like he sort of is picking at the whole idea of the IMF and kind of breaking apart like, yeah, wait a minute, what is this agency? And I just don't think you need to do that. I think
Which,
you
how
just
could he not know? Because I believe in the Alec Baldwin films, they had a congressional hearing about the IMF.
I don't know.
That was not cloistered.
One of my favorite things in this whole movie was the idea that there is this sort of thing where in government agencies only certain people get debriefed and have declassified information. So the two agents that are hunting down Ethan Hunt, I loved I did not expect to care for that at all, but I loved it. And their whole thing where he's like, yeah, Ethan Hunt and his whole clown show go rogue every couple of years. It's like, that's exactly how another government branch would see them, because all they know is for some reason, every couple of years, they get a world alert to hunt down Ethan Hunt. And then that just goes away for no reason. And the one guy is like, maybe he goes rogue for a reason. And they're just like,
Yeah, and his response was, I'm sure he does. He always has a reason.
It was that I really, really enjoyed that relationship and that concept of them coming back through and like helping them clear the train and just that little bit. I hope that's not over. I hope that is a continuing thread in the next one. But my big thing, the big weird hole in the movie that itches my brain is Haley Atwell's Grace. She's excellent. I would not change this. She was awesome in the movie, and I love Haley Atwell, and I'm really glad to see her getting to be in like a big blockbuster and really holding her own. But on paper, you have a thief who is supposed to be important enough to Ethan Hunt that the algorithm knows to put him in a room with her and Ilsa and make him choose between them. And it's a character that has this like hints of importance to Ethan Hunt, who's not in the IMF, but is a thief, but could be inducted into it. And in my head, I'm just sitting here as someone who doesn't hate Mission Impossible 2 going, this is Nia Hall, this is Nia Hall, this is Thandie Newton, this is Thandie Newton. I could not shake it because they have this really tender moment, and the emotional beat works. And I think it's just because Tom Cruise is a great actor. And she says, "You don't even know me." Haley Atwell does. And he goes, "Why does that matter?" And the other characters in the room sort of nod and agree. And I was like, ah. And then like 2 seconds later, I was like, wait a minute. Benji was the one that stuck with him in the third movie when the entire government went. He like put his neck on the line for Ethan and earned his trust. Luther is the guy who multiple times when Ethan goes rogue is like, well, I'm still with you and I'm with your plan. And you pulled me from obscurity and got me into IMF in the first place. And they've been bonded since the first one. It is absolutely true that he has no reason to be invested in Haley Atwell and Grace. So it was kind of bizarre after a little bit to think like, I feel like they're trying to write a character to fit a hole. And I can't help but think of how much more people are complaining about what happens to Rebecca Ferguson's character.
I'm complaining, but
yeah,
the only thing that
the weight of that
is
if it was Nia versus
I know
her,
Tom Cruise has talked about wanting to do these movies till he's 80, but in reality, I almost wonder if the going back to see how Tom Cruise, how Ethan Hunt got into the IMF and drawing the parallels to Haley Atwell's character and having the big ending of this be getting her into the IMF. Are they looking at how they can do Mission Impossible movies?
Well, always.
Beyond.
Notably, Jeremy
because,
Renner's gone.
Well, Ving Rhames probably he's not that far off of Tom Cruise age-wise. I don't, he doesn't have to do as much running as Tom Cruise in these movies. Or jump off planes, but I could see them trying to find a way, because Tom Cruise is also a producer here. We did get a couple comments this week, which was fun. Frankie says, thought it was amazing, but doesn't think it's any better than Fallout. We will be giving our rankings, but I don't think it's wrong to say neither of us disagree with that.
Yeah.
Let's Talk Anime says, I feel like the film had a B-movie premise, but everything else was executed.
It sure was executed. I'm teasing because this is Curtis from This Film Not Rated. So yeah, it sure was executed. That is a fact. But I assume he meant that it was executed well, like a B movie executed well. And I've heard that with the AI bot thing, other people saying that. But I mean, like, I don't think this was any more B movie than there's a Chimera virus and there's the antivirus and we have to do this and whatnot. And I know that's not the movie to pick when you're doing this, but like the Rabbit's Foot MacGuffin mystery box that J.J. Abrams creates versus the nuclear codes that we have to fake and get to like, it's the same thing.
I do like Christopher McQuarrie, and he seems to have it. He's had a long time partnership with Tom Cruise. This is now his third Mission Impossible film that he's directed, and he's done the best with it. I honestly, I've loved Christopher McQuarrie since he wrote The Usual Suspects back in the day. He was the screenwriter for The Usual Suspects, not the director. But it was this movie after that, and I don't know why I'm blanking on.
I'm going to say this, and it's going to sound like I'm trying to like be right about something or whatever, but I don't care. The Usual Suspects from beginning to end looks like it was shot in a studio soundstage. It is 100% the writing and the performances in that movie.
Well, and the kind of jaw-dropping story moment.
Yeah.
So I mentioned we were going to look at our rankings for the franchise. Since 1996, 7 installments, all built around Ethan Hunt. Eric, what is your ranking from 1 to 7?
Best to worst or worst to best?
Best to worst.
Okay. Starting at number 1, you're going to have the original. I feel like there's something about the atmosphere of those cobblestone streets, the twists and turns of the beginning of the movie, and the nature you can't recapture of the passing of the torch to Ethan Hunt, where you're letting a character take over a franchise and like a hero rising out of a world that otherwise he didn't exist in beforehand. And then it's just very competently directed, and it has these horrific elements that are in a lot of Brian De Palma movies that you just don't get in any other installment. PG-13, I guess, wasn't as hard set in stone at the time as it was. Like, I still get eerily wigged out at just his dream of the glass crunching in the hallway and the guy coming in like, Ethan, and like it freaks me out. Like, and maybe that is a huge sign that I'm biased from watching it younger. All right, so fair.
So that's still your number 1?
That's still my number 1. Right after that has to be 6, tied with 5, then 4, then 7, then 3, then 2.
Okay.
Which is weird because I think 3 has the best villain.
Yeah, poor Philip Seymour Hoffman. I just don't know if they knew exactly how to use him. That's the one that feels the most disconnected from like the core Mission Impossible team. Feels most disconnected. Yeah. You could tell J.J. Abrams missed making Felicity an Alias. He's like, hey, what if Felicity was in Alias? Dun, dun, dun.
Oh, thank you, Frankie.
I have to say, you scared me a little bit when you said you didn't hate 2. I thought it was going to be so much higher. And that
Well, no, it's just I love all these movies.
I love
2 is not bad to me, you know?
there are 5, there's 1 great film, 4 good films, 1 okay film, and 1 Travis Shamockery. But number 1 for me is Fallout, which is Mission Impossible 6. I think the action sequences, the story, kind of even wrapping up the Michelle Monaghan story, which was just hanging out there after whatever happened in Mission Impossible 3, giving it kind of a good resolution. I really like Rebecca Ferguson in that. I liked Sean Harris as the villain and seeing that come back. I liked him against Henry Cavill, who I thought was really fun. Number 2 for me is Mission Impossible 5, which is Rogue Nation. So those are the first two that Christopher McQuarrie did. Then I actually put Dead Reckoning Part 1 as number 3 for me. I think the action sequences are really incredible. I don't think the story and character beats rose to the same level as the 2 previous installments he had done, but it does give me hope. It's almost like I feel like right after you saw Infinity War, it was hard to judge it as a standalone film because you're really only like my appreciation for Infinity War changed after Endgame.
Yeah.
And whenever you have this kind of middle, movies are supposed to stand on their own, and there was enough good things in here, but it might change my perspective of seeing how it kind of comes to a head and how some of these things that got dropped get completed, but we shall see. Then I have Ghost Protocol, which at one point in time, Ghost Protocol was my favorite. It had some great, I think that was the first one where they really stepped up their visuals game and their action and intensity game. Then for me is the original Mission Impossible. I like it as a spy story. I like him and John Voight going back and forth. I like it for the time period. I just think in the modern era, they've really stepped up kind of the action and the scope of the movies that has become more impressive to me. That's Mission Impossible 3, which I actually like J.J. Abrams, despite the jokes I made a few minutes ago. Some of the franchises he's taken over and done are phenomenal. I loved when he rebooted Star Trek. The Star Trek 2009 is probably my second favorite Star Trek movie of all time because nothing's ever surpassing Wrath of Khan because of the ending. But I loved what he did, but sometimes it just doesn't quite work. And you're right. I love Philip Seymour Hoffman too, but I don't know if they made enough out of that. And then way beyond those is Mission Impossible 2, which I don't know what they were trying to do with Anthony Hopkins, but it didn't work. And I don't know what they were doing with Tom Cruise's hair, but it's an abomination. And I don't know why they picked John Woo to be the director, but none of it worked for me. I actively don't like that movie. The only reason I own it is because I bought the 6-pack of Mission Impossible.
Right. Yeah.
And it happened to be there when we were rewatching it to get ready. I was like, yes. The endless motorcycle beach fights.
Oh yeah.
So that one just not a favorite. I mean, there are worse movies.
Yeah, there are worse movies out there. I agree that MI2 is ultimately the bottom of this super quality barrel of entertainment. But in my head, there's something about me that can compartmentalize because it starts so late. Like you have espionage and gunfire and things in that movie so early. Tom Cruise doesn't do his first wire work kick in that movie until after an hour into the movie. It's like a very even espionage Australia interesting setting movie that suddenly goes like at the very end.
Plus, I think that movie doesn't age well either because that's the one where Limp Bizkit redoes the title theme.
Oh yeah. It does feel dated, for sure.
When the biscuit was a thing still. So there are some elements of that movie that are incredibly dated. And it also, you talk about Ethan Hunt and Tandy Newton's character. I think that was one of the very, very different kind of Ethan Hunt They almost tried to make him James
Well,
Bond like, and I feel like we have completely moved away from that in subsequent films. So that makes it feel also
yeah.
more like an outlier.
They are trying to tie Ethan into a cohesive character, and MI2 he sticks out like a sore thumb. And so the thing about MI2 is it is really the first movie marks the end of a period in Tom Cruise's career where he's learning and studying under massive other directors. You know, Mission Impossible 2 came out in the year 2000. And
In the
2001.
year 2000.
Okay. So, and he did Eyes Wide Shut, was released a year later, but that's like, you know, he did this tour of working with Spielberg, Scorsese, De Palma, Kubrick, and the only person he didn't work with was George Lucas, but he became a Steven Spielberg regular. And he's just like studying and studying and studying under people. But Paula Wagner and Tom Cruise they were the head of Mission Impossible 1, but he still has Brian De Palma at the helm. Mission Impossible 2, it's like pretty much easily figured out by any of the special features. It was the first big Tom Cruise lead the star like thing. And I don't think they knew how to balance that with John Woo being his own action kind of visionary. And I don't think that gelled. I think it was, and that's the thing about why Thandie Newton, it completely makes sense that she's not back, is she talked about that scene. There's a scene, if you saw it recently enough, they're on the balcony, and he is supposed to send her into like the lion's den, and he doesn't want to do it, and he's angry. And she's come out and said on set, Tom Cruise was upset at the performance she was giving. That anger is directed at her, that actress. And I always thought it was weird because that moment feels very real. And you know, it's one of the scenes that I look at and I go, there's like a good movie here. And then like in the back of my head, I learned like, oh, okay. So they were really upset. Like she was genuinely. And then she came back and she had to redo the scene later. Coming back is with more of like a bitch attitude is what she called it. And it wasn't the way she wanted to play it. It was Tom Cruise like kind of iron fisting it. And of course, he is who he is. There's no one like him, and he's super talented. And I just feel like people should just know who he is before you go into a production. But he's still the guy that screams at the set if someone's not wearing a mask right, and he will shut down production if someone has something to say. He's in control. He caused The Mummy 2017. Okay.
That's another one I try to black out, but
Yeah.
it never happened.
So, like, I can understand Thandie Newton being like, not walking back into that environment, but then them kind of like writing something. It's like, you could. And she's like, yeah, but no, like, totally fine. And then Haley Atwell did such a good job. And then Tom Cruise earns that with his acting and whatnot. And like, there's just a lot that works in this new movie that like saves that kind of thing. I'm just like, Mission Impossible 2 is always going to be this orange and blue saturated glaring blip in this franchise that otherwise has a pretty even trajectory of moving forward. So it's bizarre.
Well, that'll do it for our look at Mission Impossible. You can go check out Mission Impossible 7, which is now playing in theaters. But you know what? If you thought this week was fun, it is here. Barbenheimer
So,
week.
Are you doing
here.
Barbenheimer or Oppen Barbie? Which are you watching first?
Actually, I am seeing Barbie first.
It is going to be Barbenheimer. Okay.
Yeah.
Barbenheimer. I think we might end up. I want to do Barbenheimer, but I think we're going to do Oppen Barbie.
Either way, I like that they're marketing them together. I think it's going to be fun. You know, I know my wife's excited to see both. We're going to see Barbie on her birthday, and then
nice.
Going to go see Oppenheimer. It's another long movie. I feel like 3 years ago, when The Irishman was 3 hours, people complained that, you know, we shouldn't have movies that are that long. Not me, but some people did. Now it feels like that's just becoming routine.
Mm-hmm.
Even some of our summer blockbusters have all been pretty long. You know, Across the Spider-Verse was more than 2.5 hours. Mission Impossible, 2 hours and 45 minutes. Wow, there's been a couple other ones I have to think of.
And Oppenheimer's over 3 hours, right? Isn't
I think it's right at 3 hours.
like 3:05 or something like that.
I can't imagine it's a happy story because I watched the documentary about Robert Oppenheimer to get ready, and I was like, right.
Yeah. Hooray!
Yeah, hard to imagine a man that said, "I am become death, destroyer of worlds," didn't yield a happy biopic.
Right. So the question is, are you going to watch Oppenheimer and then Barbie's going to be a pick-me-up, or are you going to watch Oppenheimer and then Barbie's going to feel like a dystopian capitalist nightmare? So
Well, I'm watching Barbie first.
okay.
Hopefully it won't invite those comparisons. And then the week after that, we have another set of interesting cross releases. You have The Haunted Mansion, which just kind of looks fun, Disney nostalgia, and
It
Talk to
looks
Me, which
fun.
they've said is the most terrifying movie in a decade. Like,
Talk to Me is not out yet. I
comes
thought
out
I was missing
28th.
it.
28th.
See, this is what you come here for: is the quality of knowledge.
Yeah.
Like,
That's it. Exactly. Well, whether it's Mission Impossible or you dive into the Barbenheim waters, we will see you at the movies.